In the midst of a continuing civil war, elections were called in Syria this week, creating more violence. What is fueling the bloodshed? And is U.S. foreign policy creating more instability in the region, particularly for Christians? Dr. WALID PHARES, author of the new book, The Lost Spring, will tell us. And Pope Francis canonized not one but two popes last week. Raymond Cardinal Burke sat down with me in Rome to reflect on Saints John the 23rd and John Paul II, and he'll opine on the latest papal phone call reports. Finally, the World Meeting of Families will be held in Philadelphia in 2015. Is Pope Francis coming? President of the Pontifical Council for the Family, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, will tell us. And could a new pastoral approach to divorced and remarried Catholics be in the offing? The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Dr. WALID PHARES, Cardinal Raymond Burke, and Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia are straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's program, send us a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. I'll be live tweeting throughout the show. Or drop us an email, worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get started. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. On Wednesday, a missile from a Syrian government airstrike slammed into a school in Aleppo, killing at least 19 people, including 10 children. The school was at an opposition-held district in the city. Video of the aftermath showed bulldozers removing a mountain of rubble from the smashed building. Inside were blood-splattered classrooms and the remnants of what was to be a soon-to-open exhibit of children's drawings depicting Syria at war. Government strikes against rebel strongholds have escalated in recent days, coinciding with the announcement that President Bashar al-Assad will run for re-election in June. And Iraq completed its first parliamentary elections since the 2011 withdrawal of American troops. But the head of the Chaldean Catholic Church there is lamenting Western intervention in the country over the past decade. In a statement, Patriarch Louis Sacco said intervention by the West in the region did not solve the problems, but on the contrary, produced more chaos and conflict. Continuing, he said, 1,400 years of Islam could not uproot us from our land and our churches, while the policies of the West have scattered us all around the world. We are a ruined church, end quote. By the numbers, more than 1 million Christians have fled Iraq since the beginning of the coalition war in 2003. Less than 400,000 remain. Patriarch Sacco further fears that the Christian presence in Iraq will vanish altogether in the next 10 years as the wave of emigration continues. And more troubling news from Nigeria. Scores of the more than 200 girls and young women recently kidnapped from a school are being forced to marry their jihadist abductors. According to a local civic organization, parents have received word of mass weddings. Boko Haram militants are reportedly selling the girls as wives or sex slaves for $12 each. The sham marriages are likely temporary, as Boko Haram is at the same time negotiating an unspecified ransom for their release. On Wednesday, protesters took to the streets of the Nigerian capital, calling for the release of the schoolgirls and urging the government to intensify its search. More on the future of Islam, the Middle East, and the plight of Christians throughout the Muslim world in our next segment. And Chinese officials in the eastern province of Zhejiang have demolished a church that has been the focal point of protests by area Christians. The New York Times reports that thousands of protesters had attempted to protect the Sanjiang Christian church from demolition. The church was erected just this past December, and even though it's officially registered with the communist regime and not part of the underground church movement, the church was deemed too large by the local communist authority. The chair of the province's Religious Affairs Committee labeled Christianity's growth in the region too excessive and too haphazard. The church building was among a dozen slated to be razed. And for the second time in a row, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom is asking the State Department to significantly expand its list of worst religious freedom offenders. As in 2013, the congressionally created panel says that continued and escalating religious persecution warrants the countries of particular concern designation for Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Vietnam, Egypt, Iraq, Nigeria, and Tajikistan. The Commission also recommends adding Syria to that list. The Commission is criticizing the State Department for not accepting its 2013 recommendations. More about this report and religious persecution around the world on next week's program, when we're joined in studio by the chair of the Commission on International Religious Freedom, Robbie George. And Wednesday's Senate defeat of a minimum wage increase is making much political hay. Senate Republicans blocked the election year Democratic bill, which would have raised the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour. It was the latest in a stream of bills that President Barack Obama and Capitol Hill Democrats designed this year to cast themselves as the party of economic fairness. Republicans say it would have been too expensive for employers and would have cost hundreds of thousands of jobs. Both sides were quick to point fingers.
They said no to helping millions work their way out of poverty.
This is about trying to make this side of the aisle look bad and hard-hearted, and to try to rescue this midterm election coming up in November because they see the president's approval rating going down.
Senate Democrats have turned down overtures from moderate Republicans for a compromise. The U.S. bishops had been watching the legislation very closely all year and lobbying for its passage. New doubts are being cast on the authenticity of the so-called Gospel of Jesus' Wife papyrus. Remember this? Several scholars are now noting the similarities between the papyrus, which suggests Jesus was married, and another dubious sister scrap that was part of a collection anonymously given to Harvard professor Karen King in 2012. Now, the sister scrap of purported antiquity contains a portion of the Gospel of St. John. The two pieces look similar. In fact, carbon dating results, the color and texture of both scraps are the same. Both are written in an obscure Coptic dialect, and even the ink in both pieces share the same chemical makeup. Most striking, as noted on CNN's Belief blog by a Yale and Notre Dame professor, is that the fragment of John and the Jesus' Wife papyrus are written in the same hand, using the same ink and even the same writing instrument. The problem? Scholars have already concluded that the St. John fragment is a fake. The piece appears to be a handwritten reproduction of an early Coptic manuscript that is accessible on the internet. The Jesus' Wife piece is likely a handwritten reproduction of the heretical Gospel of Thomas, also available online. Forgery loves company, apparently. And finally, a new Harris poll has discovered America's favorite books. The top 10 is dominated by classic novels, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Catcher in the Rye, to name a few, but not the #1 slot. America's favorite book is, drum roll please, the Bible. Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind held on to the #2 slot, and the only contemporary book to appear on the 2014 list came in at #3, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. I posted the question on my Facebook page at Raymond Arroyo. I want to hear from you. What's your favorite book? I hope it's one that I wrote. Next year, Kerman, Durman, and the Relic of Perilous Falls will land on the list. You just watch. When we return, peace remains elusive in war-torn Syria, despite recently announced democratic elections in that country. Iraq held elections this week. What is driving the chaos in the Middle East? And is democracy even possible? Author of The Lost Spring, Dr. WALID PHARES joins us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My first guest is an advisor to the Anti-Terrorism Caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives. And for over 20 years, he served as an expert on conditions in the Middle East for the U.S. immigration courts. Tonight, he'll talk about global jihad, the worsening situation throughout Africa and the Middle East, all captured in his fascinating new book, The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid. Please welcome back to the program, Dr. WALID PHARES. Always great to see you. I'm glad you're back. So much to talk about this week with this Syrian situation. We are seeing elections burning all across the Middle East, in Egypt, in Iraq, announced elections in Syria. What does this mean? Is this a hopeful sign?
It is a race between the fighting forces on the ground for legitimacy. Each party wants to say, I am elected, I'm democratically elected because of the Arab Spring. So in Syria, for example, obviously, President Bashar al-Assad wants to re-elect himself.
Right.
In Iraq, Mr. Maliki wants to ensure a majority in parliament to continue with his policies. In Egypt, that's an interesting one. It's the first post-Muslim Brotherhood election for the president. I would be more interested in the parliamentary election in Egypt as well, which is coming very soon. And last in Lebanon, an impossible election in Lebanon, which is not happening because of Hezbollah at this point in time.
I want to talk about a lot of issues. While we're on Egypt, you have the head of the security forces. It appears he will be the president in Egypt. The United States, the Senate here behind us, Senator Leahy has put a hold on Egyptian aid. They're concerned that those Apache helicopters and the aid we're sending to the military is being used excessively. Your thoughts?
Excessively in the Sinai against Al-Qaeda? No, I think very shyly. We should be supporting the Egyptian armed forces at this point in time, which have behind them, by the way, the entire Arab moderate camp in the Arabian Peninsula. And let's be clear on this one. Israel also is involved in this. So if we are smart, we need to gather our moderate allies in the region and support them.
Why did the United States miss the Arab Spring? Why didn't they see it coming?
Because they were very badly advised. Remember, we have discussed so many times, the Middle East studies elite in this country has basically failed in providing for governments the real picture on the ground. Who are our real allies, civil societies, minorities? Who are our foes, the jihadists? Oh, we call the jihadists yoga people. Oh, they're very nice. And we got what we got in Egypt, in Libya, and Syria.
I mean, it is collapsing. The whole Middle East is collapsing. And there doesn't seem to be, aside from Jordan, there really is no ally for the United States. I mean, Saudi Arabia, I guess. But aside from those two in Israel, you have nothing else left. All these Arab countries have basically collapsed.
But Raymond, we are also losing our allies. Our relationship, the administration relationship with Israel is not that good. We have failed the Egyptian 33 million people who demonstrated against the Muslim Brotherhood. You mentioned Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, very upset with our policy because we sided with the wrong people. With whom? With the Brotherhood in North Africa, and now we're going to cut a deal with Iran.
And how did that happen? Why are we siding with those people? You claim in the book that there are lobbying forces. Who are these people?
Well, this is the Brotherhood lobby in Washington, which is backed by Qatar and by petrodollar. And that's not just me. That's the entire Arab world, which is saying this, with the exception of Qatar. And there's the pro-Iran lobby, which now want to make a lot of interest with the opening to the regime.
You say in the book, and I want to quote this U.S. administration, you say, represents the greatest retreat from supporting freedom since the post-World War I policies. How so?
Look, we had this declaration, with the Woodrow Wilson theoretical declaration about supporting freedom and self-determination. And what we have seen over the past 5 years, since 2009, the opening was a letter to the Grand Ayatollah of Iran, and then the abandonment of the Green Revolution, and then addressing the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and then ignoring the plight of Middle Eastern Christians in 5 countries at least, and then abandoning Darfur. So what would you call that? A global retreat from the region.
Now, the administration will say, and I've spoken to people in the administration who say, wait a minute, we were able to bring Iran to the table. They dialed back their nuclear ambitions. They tamped down the progress of their nuclear programs. This is a victory for us. You would say what?
A prime minister, a British prime minister, came back to his airport in London in the 30s and said, I have a piece of paper. We won the peace. Hitler is scaling back. What are we talking about? First of all, the Iranians are building mass-scale production of long-range missiles. What do you want to send with the long-range missiles? Flowers? Of course they're going to send a bomb. So what they're doing right now is developing the greatest dome. Missiles, anti-aircraft, terrorism, Hezbollah.
And they got the sanctions dialed back by the United States.
Sanctions are going down.
Dollars are flooding in.
And what do they give us? Oh, from 20% we'll go down to 5% production of the uranium for 6 months. The time that we finish the missile and finish everything. I mean, this is very serious.
Let's talk for a moment about Nigeria. We are seeing this Boko Haram. I spoke to an archbishop in Rome this past week, several from Nigeria. They are so concerned about the growth of this terrible organization that is so insidious. Now we read of these women who were abducted. They routinely go in and arrest or kill or kidnap women, children, blow away villages. How can this be stopped, and where is the international community and the United States here?
The Boko Haram, Raymond, are the Taliban of Nigeria and of Africa. They are growing because we are not stopping their ideological indoctrination. It's all about the ideology. If we don't recognize it, the Obama administration doesn't want to recognize that there is an ideology. These are extremists. How do they become jihadists? So we need to do more work in the war of ideas, which we have abandoned, unfortunately.
Let's talk for a moment about Benghazi. We're hearing a lot about it this week. Emails are leaking out claiming, say this was not a foreign policy failure, but blame it on the videotape. Then we have this Brigadier General testifying this week on Capitol Hill. And it seems that this story continues to unravel. What does it mean, and what does Benghazi represent in your mind?
The administration made a strategic mother of all mistakes in the first 24 hours of the attack. They should have said, look, this is an attack as we were attacked on 9/11, as we are attacked around the world, and we need to do better to strike back at them. And they should have been, doing a strike back. Right. That would have been off. Instead, they have been saying, this is not a failure, this is the video, and I'm very interested. The next email we're going to discover is who is this individual or group that suggested that this is a video because they had something else on their mind. They had the whole issue of Islamophobia. They wanted to develop a whole other policy.
Right.
It failed.
You write about that in the book, Islamophobia. You believe this has almost turned into a weapon. For whom and against whom?
Well, this is the weapon of the Islamist, let's say, Muslim Brotherhood and Iranian lobbies. What they do is this. Instead of discussing real reasons for Islamophobia, the fear of what's happening, anybody who's critical of these regimes in the region or of the lobby here, what are they describing him or her as? Islamophobe. It's basically what National Socialists would have done or did in the 30s. Anybody who criticizes the Nazis will become a Germanophobe, an anti-Germany person.
Tell me how these failures that you lay out in this book, you call it the lost spring, how do these failures, how did they come about? Why, at this point, haven't policymakers on Capitol Hill and in the administration realized we're way off course here? Things are spiraling out of control. We have to correct. There doesn't seem to be anyone saying we need to correct now and this is what we should do.
What happened when we had a failure on 9/11? We were attacked? A 9/11 commission. And I think the administration is resisting the idea that there was a breach, that there was a failure, because they don't want to form a commission to review our policy with regard to Benghazi, Egypt, Syria, everything else, because that would mean that Congress will have more influence in foreign policy. They don't want to concede that.
We're having the Patriarch of Antioch on next week, who's in Damascus. As I look at the headlines crossing my desk from Syria, this is a disaster on all sides. And for the American people, it is so confusing because our policy is we are funding, sending weapons and money to the rebels in the region. But it seems the rebels are actually jihadists. And though the Assad regime is hardly, choir boys, these poor people are being slaughtered in between these warring factions. What is the answer here?
We are always late. We have been late to the Arab Spring, and now, of course, for Syria. In the first 9 months of the events in Syria, we had real demonstrations on the ground.
From whom?
by civil society people in the beginning. Assad was the bad dictator. He was isolated.
Right.
Iran was not in Syria. We were still in Iraq. Hezbollah was not yet in Syria. And Al-Qaeda was not in. We had 9 months of this. We didn't do a thing.
Like the Green Revolution in Iran.
Like the Green Revolution in Iran. So these are windows of opportunities. If we don't do much about it, then we're going to pay a much higher price or not intervene at all.
But now we're hearing about crucifixions.
Yeah,
these rebels are crucifying people. They're claim they're spies. It's barbaric. The barbarity that you see on the ground there and the loss of Christian heritage, the churches, the holy sites, it's heartbreaking because not only are the Christians there being deprived, these shrines, all of humanity,
of course,
is being deprived.
It's a big loss.
Let's move on and talk about this policy in the Middle East where we are abandoning these minorities, Christians and otherwise, in the entire region. Why? Why not? Why hasn't the administration, why hasn't Congress thrown their weight behind protecting these minorities? These refugees run back and forth from one war zone into another. Now they're going to Iraq. It's madness.
It is madness. It's a disaster. It's one of the disasters and the catastrophes. I am calling on Congress and hopefully the next Congress, this and the next administration. It's really a long-term issue to correct. The problem is, if you want to address really the issue of the minorities, you're going to address the issue of who is persecuting them. The jihadists are persecuting them. The Iranian regime is persecuting them. So if we want to partner with the jihadists or the Islamists or the Brotherhood, and we want to cut a deal with the Iranian, it will be very difficult to criticize them for persecuting the minorities and then do business with them. We have to make a choice. Who are our real friends? Civil societies, women, and minorities. We're going to begin with them. We are having them pay the price of our policies.
You heard my headline earlier. Patriarch Sacco in Iraq said, "We are a ruined church." Is this what you see for Syria and in other regions of the Middle East?
Unfortunately, Raymond, yes. What has happened in Iraq, the ethnic cleansing of Christians, is now happening in Syria. Christians in Lebanon are blocked on the political level. The Coptic Christians of Egypt have been attacked and are attacked by the Muslim Brotherhood. And of course, what is happening in Sudan is beyond a disaster, the demonstration, I mean, the massacre of Christian minorities. So we do have a regional problem for the Christians in the region and all the way down to Nigeria that we have been discussing.
Aren't we reaching a state where the civil society that you talk about in the book as the salvation, if you will, for these entire countries, that civil society is contracting, disappearing, relocating, and emigrating out of the countries? So there is no civil society left to speak of, yes?
There are no democratic forces or peaceful forces in these civil societies that have been given a chance. The chance came very little in the beginning of the Arab Spring. We chose instead to talk with the Muslim Brotherhood. We chose instead to cut a deal with the Ayatollahs. These choices were wrong. We need to correct the policy, as I suggest in my book. We need Congress to remind the administration that we need to have a United States policy to partner with the right people in the region.
Tell me what that policy should look like, and let's go country by country. What should we do in Syria? Should we continue arming these rebels and sending them armaments?
We should not send weapons to the jihadists. We should actually work with the Kurds in the north, with the Christians in the north, and create a safe haven for them, have a flag of a free Syria, and then not send weapons to the jihadists and not assist the Syrian regime, the Bashar al-Assad regime, to survive that. That's how we begin, as the Kurds have done in northern Iraq, as the southern Sudanese have done in Sudan. In Iraq, for example, we also need to work with all these minorities and the good guys in the Sunni communities, in the Shia communities. We have not created this coalition of moderates across Iraq. And we were living there. We had our forces there. We left Iraq in the hands of the extremists.
What about Iran and that policy with Iran? What would you do?
Oh, boy. First of all, we need to stop what we're doing. You know what we're doing right now? Not only we have lifted sanctions, we are sending billions of dollars of Iranian frozen money here. But instead of sending that money to the opposition, in Iran, to those youth, to those girls, to those women, we are sending it to the Ayatollahs. What do you think they're doing with that money? $1 billion by now. There will be $20 billion that we're going to release to the Iranian regime. This is madness in my sense.
I want to shift gears just a little bit toward this Ukraine situation because all of this seems to fit. It's all one piece when you look at the whole globe. The Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Patriarch, has become the subject of some criticism because it is assumed, and some are suggesting, that he is marching hand in hand with Putin and trying to destabilize the region using religion. Your thoughts on this?
Well, there is some truth to this, but how did we get to that point? So now that the Orthodox are nervous, they're nervous about the Obama administration's policy. In the Middle East, it goes back to the Middle East, because when the administration did not act in Syria, even after the use of chemical weapons, when we had partners in Libya that are jihadists and sent weapons and people to Syria to kill the Christians.
The Russians saw an opening.
Yeah, that's the problem. And now, because of the mistakes we've done in the Middle East, now other areas in the world are coming against us.
And the Patriarch of Kiev and the Patriarch of Russia are at great odds, and they are fighting to hold on to their people. And it's amazing that they're smart enough, Putin is smart enough to use the culture to pull people to his side. And this is really what your whole book is about.
That's what
it's about the power of culture, religion, ethnicity, history, and civil society to move a people in the right direction. He's way ahead of the game.
Unfortunately, he is. For our foreign policy, I hope, again, that Congress will help the administration understand better international relations.
Any positive signs you see on the horizon in the Middle East?
I see positive signs all over the Middle East, but unfortunately, they're going to be done without us, without at least this Washington.
Like what?
In Egypt, the 33 million people who brought down the Brotherhood without us. In Lebanon, the Cedars Revolution coming back. I still believe that even in Iran, even when we have abandoned those youth, they are still there. They are brewing. They will be coming back. When I say the lost spring, remember, spring is a season. There's always another spring that comes back. We need to be ready for the next spring.
Very good. WALID PHARES, thank you so much for being on. Always a pleasure and so insightful. The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid by Dr. WALID PHARES is available at bookstores everywhere and online. It is a must-read. Be sure to check it out. When we return, the World Meeting of Families is slated for Philadelphia in 2015. Might Pope Francis make this his first visit to the U.S.? The president of the Pontifical Council for Families, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, joins me with the scoop when the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
With the extraordinary synod on the pastoral care of families scheduled for October and talk of adjusting the Church's approach to divorced and remarried Catholics, the family is front and center for the Pope and the Church. In addition to that, the World Meeting of Families is set for Philadelphia in 2015. I sat down with the president of the Pontifical Council for the Family, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, to discuss the Philly event, the possibility of a U.S. visit by Pope Francis, and he had some interesting insights on the Pope's alleged phone call to that divorced and remarried woman in Argentina. Here's my discussion with Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia. Tell me, you are the head of the Pontifical Council for the Family. This was founded in 1981 by Pope John Paul II, who was just canonized. Tell me about the significance of that and how it has reshaped your work.
Okay. The Pope, the Saint John Paul II, once said, I would like to be remembered as a Pope of the family. This definition of his pontificate underlined the importance that he was in founding this Pontifical Council. And there is another reason. The day of the foundation was the 13th of May 1981, the day of the
Feast of Our Lady of Fatima.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was impossible for him to announce because he was shot. But I think that this occasion underlined that there is a sort of martyrdom atmosphere in this field. And the family now is surely defends in a strong way, but St. Paul John Paul II.
Do you feel the family is under attack in a multiplicity of ways? Some have even suggested that this upcoming world meeting with families happening next year in Philadelphia, that this is somehow a protest or an opposition to certain lifestyles. What is your reaction?
We are in a really difficult situation, contradictory. For example, the culture is not in favor of family, but each one of us feel deeply the need of family. So it is important to understand what is the real desire of family. So I think for us it is clear that to be alone is a disaster for all people. We need to stay in family. And in this sense it is important to defend the fundamental structure. Father, mother, grandparents, children, nephew. This kind of family built culture, state, people.
The world.
The world. The world.
We hear Pope Francis constantly sounding these themes.
Exactly.
The young and old need to be together. Don't forget your elders. You know, you retired people, go to your grandchildren.
Exactly.
That family unity, and how one generation blesses and supports the other, sustains the other.
This is the secret of the history and the salvation of the nations and of the world. In this sense, for example, I was really proud in the 14th of February, the day, the St. Valentine's Day, with in the St. Peter's Square around 30,000
new couples.
engaged.
New engaged couples.
And now, for example, I would like to organize before this synod the day of older people, of the grandparents, in order to underline this important link between generations.
Tell me about this upcoming synod. In October, the Pope has called a synod to focus on family. This is the coming together of the bishops of the world to focus on marriage and family. What is the goal? What do you hope to come out of that? I know you want to publish a catechism on marriage and the family.
I would like to hope that we will have a new spring of families. So, and it is really peculiar that St. Paul John II start his pontificate, his first synod, about family. And Pope Francis start his pontificate with 2 synods about family. That's why I think it's absolutely necessary to put in the center of our concern this matter. The Church do this. I hope also the government, the states, the nations, the United Nations, we have to put in the center of our concerns the family in order to help this important institution for the development, for the peace, for the build of the solidarity among different generations, different peoples, different persons.
Tell me, one of the themes that we've seen emerging in recent days in the preparatory meeting for this upcoming synod, there seems to be a global debate. You have Cardinal Walter Casper on one side, you have Cardinal Raymond Burke and Cardinal O'Malley and others on the other side. And the central question is what to do about divorced and remarried Catholics. Is there something that can be done there? One side is saying you should permit them to get back to communion in some way. There must be a path there. The other side is saying this is the teaching of Jesus Christ and it cannot be changed. You, Archbishop, would say what?
So, we have to underline firstly the steps of importance problems. This is not the first, in my opinion. Firstly, it is important to underline one question. The importance of the family on against the attitude to be alone. This is the first point for us, for the Church, and for the society. Second, we have to underline the importance of the attitude towards the grandparents, towards the children, towards the abandoned, and we have to deal with this great question. Then we will have also this question. And about this matter, we have to underline firstly one thing. We have to be closer closest towards the family in difficulties, families broken. So we have to stay with them in a really concrete way. And then we can deal with this part of this great scale of problems. And during the synod, we'll discuss about this. But
yeah, this has become, as you know, being here in Rome, there have been magazines published with Cardinal Casper's address. There's a debate raging, and now the Pope is reported to have called a woman in Argentina on the phone, and they're saying it's a change in church teaching.
Yeah, the risk is to move this question in an ideological question, and you have to be careful. We are not in search of a new law. We have to be responsible to stay with them, to accompany them, to stay physically with these people, because we have really a great problem with the first family, with the other family, with the children, with the parents, etc. We have to deal with all these people. And then we can deal also with the little space about the Eucharist. But I would like to avoid a sort of we write a new law and avoid the personal responsibility to stay together with them. And I have to say clearly, the body of Christ is not only Eucharist, it's ourselves to stay with them. Our closeness is more important at the beginning, and then we can resolve the other problems.
So in your opinion, that is not any change in church teaching that Pope Francis signaled?
I think that we will find a solution. I think, but not in ideological field. We will find a solution in a pastoral field. Is not, I would say.
And do you think Pope Francis was leading the way in that conversation? That he might be opening up some new ground?
Yes, I think so. I think so. I am sure that we finally find a pastoral solution without put away our responsibility to stay with them.
Tell me about your upcoming visit. You are going to be going to the United Nations.
Yes.
And you're not speaking there alone on the family. You're being joined by others. Tell me about that.
Exactly. The family is a patrimony of humanity. It's not a Catholic it's a matter. It's a human matter.
It's not a Catholic collectible.
Exactly, exactly. That's why in the 15th of May there is the Day of Family led by the United Nations. And as Olici we organize a side event where I would like to present the family matter not alone as a Catholic, but we will have Jewish people, Muslim people, and African women in order to underline that all of us are interested in this matter. And in Philadelphia, in next September, because the United States are really one of the most important countries of the world, surely. And that's why I would like to construct this week that will be the Philadelphia at that time will be the capital of family of the world.
Of the world, yeah.
And I would like to have with us all Christians, all religions, all all humanists, because we have to support this institution with which we built.
Do you expect Pope Francis to attend that world meeting with families?
We hope, obviously. And
any indication so far? I know it's far in advance. They usually don't confirm trips this far out.
Yes.
But what is your sensibility?
I think that the Pope understands very well the importance of the event. And we are just the week before the synod. And I hope that the Pope will participate in this really important event for the Church, for the world, and for the United States too.
When we return, the head of the Vatican's High Court, Raymond Cardinal Burke, sat down with me in Rome to discuss the two popes canonized last week and much more. Don't miss the exclusive when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
He is the head of the Vatican's High Court, the Apostolic Signatura, one of the most influential American cardinals serving in Rome. Raymond Cardinal Burke joined me in Rome for an exclusive interview. We discussed the historic canonizations of John the 23rd and John Paul II, and he also weighed in on Pope Francis's phone call to the Argentinian woman. Here is an encore of my interview with Raymond Cardinal Burke. I want to start with John Paul II. He raised you to become a bishop of St. Louis, before that in Wisconsin, in La Crosse. In what way did he shape your ministry, and what is the most important memory you have of him?
I would say that the most important memory was his attention to the priesthood and to the theology of the priesthood, which had suffered so severely in the years after the council, this kind of confusion about the royal priesthood of the baptized and the ordained priesthood. And he began almost immediately writing letters to priests every Holy Thursday, and then he wrote the beautiful apostolic exhortation, Pastores Dabo Vobis, and throughout his entire pontificate, he taught us how to be good priests, not only by his remarkable magisterium, but also by his example.
Tell me about, and you deal with this every day, in your current capacity as the head of the Supreme Court of the Vatican, I guess is the shorthand, the Apostolic Signatura. He updated the Code of Canon Law. He also gave us the Catechism. Could you put both of those rather important, though administrative events in some perspective? Why do you think he went to such efforts?
Well, it's interesting because it was St. John the 23rd who announced the revision of the Code of Canon Law, together with the announcement of the Council and the Synod for the Diocese of Rome. And that work, of course, had to wait for the Council to finish, but then there was this long period after the Council, and still the revision didn't come. And an unfortunate thing happened was some people began to think, well, there wasn't any more any canon law, and the kind of euphoria after the Council, you know, the era of love and freedom. And so it was John Paul II who, with determination from the beginning of his pontificate, insisted that this revision be completed. And in 1983, he was able to promulgate the code. And then, not too long thereafter, to mandate the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I would put it rather simply, and it's this, that obviously the height of our life in the Church is the encounter with Christ, a personal relationship with Christ. But in order to know Christ, and in order to be disposed to encounter Him, we need discipline, which comes through the Church's laws and through the moral law above all, but also the particular laws, for instance, which govern the sacred liturgy or Catholic education, the various aspects of our lives. And of course we need sound doctrine. Otherwise we have strange things like people who claim that they believe in Jesus Christ, but they don't believe that He's God the Son incarnate, God made man. And so I think that John Paul II, soon to be St. John Paul II, gave us really a remarkable gift that we're still drawing upon, and we will be for decades, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the Code of Canon Law.
Well, as I thought about this, form is so important, form as well as substance. And it seems these two moments, the updating of the Code and the Catechism, was part of making sure that that form was in place so that people could have that encounter. That's what it really is about. It's serving that moment.
That's correct, because when you don't have the form, when you don't have the good order, then the encounter with Christ is blocked. It's blocked by our own selfishness, it's blocked by confusion. Of course, we must never forget that Satan is always at work sowing the seeds of confusion and error, and it is our doctrine and our discipline that helps us to be strong in fighting those kind of temptations.
Yeah. And John Paul had that beautiful way of balancing both an engaging, welcoming approach with doctrinal solidity and surety.
That's right.
And he made sure that he kept those in a beautiful balance. In what way did he inspire you? What do you recall of that, not only his witness, but personally, because you encountered him so many times?
My most outstanding or extraordinary encounter with him was, of course, at the time that he ordained me a bishop on January 6th of 1995. And I saw in that moment the complete investment of the man in the giving himself to the church, ordaining these new bishops, and in the homily, for instance, directing a personal word to each bishop about his challenges as a shepherd of the flock. And we had then as our example the Bishop of the Universal Church, John Paul II himself, to use our best efforts to communicate the truth of the faith, but always to hold to that truth, not to be communicating ourselves, but to be communicating Jesus Christ. Right. And that was his whole message of new evangelization.
I want to talk for a moment. The last time we spoke, we talked about this global debate, conversation, dialogue, I suppose, that the cardinals are having about how do you deal with divorced and remarried Catholics. You have been very outspoken. Cardinal O'Malley has been very outspoken, as has Cardinal Casper on, I would imagine, the other side of this debate. There was a phone call the Pope made to a woman in Argentina that has been getting an enormous amount of media play, where he is alleged to have said to her, and we have to put that in quotation marks, tell her she's divorced and remarried, and he said, you may go to communion. What impression is that sending, and are you concerned that this may tip this debate one way or the other?
Well, I can't imagine, except in the most superficial of all worlds, that it would tip the debate. A report in the media of a phone conversation, and that report, as far as I know, is based solely on the word of the woman or her husband. And until the one who spoke the word tells us what he said and what he intended, I'm not in a position to surmise. But if we let things like this, these kind of stories, distract us from teaching the truth about marriage and seeing how that truth can be more effectively communicated to young people so that they be prepared for marriage. And as God created marriage from the beginning, as our Lord Jesus himself referred to from the beginning, he made the man and woman for an indissoluble, faithful, and procreative union. And so yes, it's causing a lot of consternation. A lot of people are very disturbed. We have to keep ourselves on solid ground and say, well, until the Pope himself says what he intended, we're just based on a story.
And even the Vatican spokesman the other day said, this is not how we teach magisterially via a phone call.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Even, you know, and whether it's legitimate or not.
No, and I wouldn't for the moment impute to Pope Francis that he intended to give a signal about church doctrine by calling someone on the phone. I mean, this is just absurd.
Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are on my website, and I'll bring you the latest news and commentary throughout the week, and I post the entire show there. If you sign up for my free e-blast, I'll send you all kinds of exclusives, as those of you who subscribe already know. Go to the center of the website, RaymondArroyo.com. You can sign up for the e-blast there. Join us next week. We have an incredible show. Robert George, the chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, will be here. And since it's Mother's Day weekend, Dr. Meg Meeker will discuss that special relationship between mothers and their sons and what you might be doing wrong. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. We'll see you next time. Bye now.